Welcome to Education Roundtable. My name is Larry Petraccaro, and I have with me three Columbia High School students, Mia Goldstein, Justice Williams, and Nina Kambili. And let me give you a little bit of background. Mia is a senior at CHS. She's an alternate rep to the board, the school board, as a liaison. She's also the director of the PM News, so she'll probably give me some critique when this is over. And she's organized some protests and forums that happened in the aftermath of the Brown and Garner cases, along with a fellow student who couldn't be here, a senior, Sophia Petros. Justice is a senior. She's the president of Diversity Rocks, and we'll talk a little bit about that, a discussion group that tackles relevant social issues. And she was also one of the organizers and panelists at the forums that Mia had put together. And Nina is a junior. She's president and co-founder of one of the feminism clubs, and she can give us a little explanation about that. And she's also running for the student representative to the Board of Education next year. So let me start with a question that's kind of addressed to two of you at least, and that is the role of the Board of Education liaison. If you could just give me a little bit of an idea of what that is, what you're expected to do, and whether in fact the board does accept input from you, and if that input is personal or if it reflects what, let's say, you see as a tenor or the feelings in the high school.
I think, to put it simply, the role of the liaison is to be the voice of the students.
Mm-hmm.
And to put it less simply, the liaison goes to the meetings, is a non-voting member, and has, student minutes where, at a time during the meeting, the Board of Ed rep can just tell what the students are doing, what their opinions are, what their concerns are, and whether or not they're listened to is really up to interpretation. But there's actually been a lot of progress made, with the dress code specifically. The dress code was reformed, and to get new language that was less oppressive almost.
Impressive.
Yeah.
There's just a word, okay.
Yeah, but so yeah, I think the board does listen because at the end of the day, they know that they're there to serve the students. So that's the position, essentially.
Okay. And now that you're running, is that what you signed up for, Nina, or is that how you understood it as well?
Yes. I mean, personally, I'm just trying to find a constructive way to kind of turn, my passion, into kind of a more productive role, and how I can become more outspoken, more involved. And I do think that that's very important. And I'm also haven't been very impressed by, the actual ability for students to express themselves to the board. I mean, at the last meeting, I think the community speaks started at 10:40 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, I want to see if I can get that position. How can I, bring student voices back to the board?
Okay. Well, as long as we're talking about the school, and this question I'll address to the three of you, Columbia's a big school. I think I read one point in time that it might have been the biggest high school in Essex County. I don't know if that is the case or still the case, but it is a big school. And it's, what would certainly, appear to be a diverse school. Is there any kind of, is there a unity among the students? Do you see the school as a unifying factor in the student population, or do we wind up with little groups of students, generating their own little cabals, so to speak?
I think it's inevitable. I mean, we're in high school, and there are cliques, and there are friend groups, and there are sports. There are the jocks, there are the kids who are more into theater, there are the kids who are more into robotics or academics. Everyone has their own niche at Columbia High School, and I think we can all agree that when we see our school unite the most at football games, where we're kind of even though on the stands we may be separated into these groups, these cliques, there seems to be this spirit of we are Columbian. But also, as someone inside of the school, someone who's navigated these cliques and these groups and these different clubs, there's there are two different kinds of Columbias. There is the quote-unquote black Columbia, and then there's the white Columbia. And what's funny is that there's this kind of unity. Ironically, there's a unity in that we understand both the black Columbia and the white Columbia understand that they exist separately, and they understand that there's a need to kind of maintain the status quo, that there's this coexistence and they're completely separate. And that understanding is, ironically, a way that we unify, the way that we kind of come to terms with the fact that we are segregated.
So division is the unifying factor, so recognition of that. Now, is that something that, as the status quo, you feel should continue, or?
No. Not at
Well,
all.
how would you change it? I mean, what can be done to change it? I mean, you guys are in the school. You know, I, as an adult, and we look at, and I had 3 sons that went through the school, but over a longer period of time. So, you know, you develop perceptions. I mean, we're all going to develop perceptions. We're going to develop opinions. And, you know, when the opinions and the facts don't necessarily coincide, you're a lot more likely to believe your opinions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you guys suggest that this thing be changed?
Well, I mean, I've been looking into recently, you know, the ACLU complaint about leveling, and I think that a lot of the social issues and divisions that come like into play at the high school are the ones that are starting in like the lower grades, like in elementary schools and middle schools, where you see like these huge like racial disparities between the leveling. It's like completely ridiculous, and it's almost unbelievable until you read these like extremely thorough reports, and you go to like these they're having forums where they like are discussing with parents these realities and what we can do to change them, and you start to realize that this begins so early that it becomes a part of our culture. It's like part of the system now. So if all of the, well, not all of the, like a majority of the black kids are ending up in certain classes, and the majority of the white kids are ending up in certain classes, or the rich kids are in certain classes and the poor kids are in certain classes, by the time that we're older, we're all running in completely different circles. And I think that that social element is like so tied to the leveling at our school that leveling is almost like our culture now.
Well, is leveling, from a practical point of view, let's say just from the academic point of view, does it make sense?
Or as a merit-based system, there should be no harm in a merit-based system. That should be the way that everything should work. But it should be, you shouldn't be doomed to a lower
And it
level.
doesn't exist in a vacuum. That's
Right.
the problem. So, you know, you see the kids who have less engaged parents at home, aka the kids who have parents who have to work all the time, might not be able to get the help that they need, or there's no structure in place to help them get up to those higher levels no matter how much potential they have, and then they end up stuck in a rut. And then that's where you kind of start to see black Columbia, white Columbia. If the black kids are more likely to be poor as they are in the United States, I'm pretty sure, yeah,
Right.
there's
Yeah.
definitely statistics to back that up.
Exactly.
But then you start to see division.
Right.
Well, that's a problem that I think we're wrestling with as a country. You know, and you know, as an outsider, you guys being insiders to Columbia, you know, it's difficult for me to understand how you can not have leveling on a merit-based basis, and in the sense that it seems to me it's feasible or possible that you can actually do harm, if you will, to students who could achieve better outcomes if they were held back by their students. Now, having said that, you know, that's only one of the aspects of school is academic, right? I guess there has to be other aspects of school. But your point that it exists starts at the elementary level. You know, it's always easier to solve something early on. And I didn't think there was leveling in the very early grades.
They've taken it.
No, but it starts young. You know, like when you're split up into reading groups, or like certain kids are punished based on behavior, and teachers give recommendations. Like, really, like by 3rd grade, when you start taking your NJ Asks, or maybe now it's Park,
Yeah.
then like that's when it starts, because your track is defined by your 3rd grade test scores.
Right.
And if your test scores are poor, then you're not going to go anywhere. You're stuck.
And there's no
And it's
mechanism
3rd
to
grade.
move, right? Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
agree with you.
yeah.
I mean, there's, actually, I had often wondered about that. It's, you know, I felt that tracking by itself, if it addressed the issues that were necessary for learning, would be fine. It's sort of what you said, Justice. I mean, if it were merit-based and there was an opportunity to show that you had demonstrate that you can move from one track to another, one level to another, the tracking ought to be the vehicle to move you into another educational level, so to speak. It shouldn't be the rut, as one of you mentioned it, that keeps you there forever, right?
I think it's hard for us to look. I think as high schoolers, I think it's hard for us to look, or even as adults, especially in this community, we look at our elementary schools, we look at our middle schools and our high schools as these small things, and we think that they're untouchable by a larger system, a larger oppressive system. And to what Mia was saying, I think it starts way earlier, it definitely starts in elementary school, but I think it starts way earlier because we tend to think that our education system is untouched by just a basic system of racism. We are human beings who are a part of the system. So as much as we'd like for the leveling system to just be merit-based, there are humans who work within that system with their own prejudices, with their own misconceptions and ideas of who a person is and their potential based on their socioeconomic status, the color of their skin, their gender, and all of those things play a part. And for us to try to act like those things do not exist and to just push them aside actually does more harm than it does good. It's better for you to acknowledge that someone may have it harder because of their financial situation or simply because of the fact that they are black or that because they're a girl. When you acknowledge that, then you're in a way leveling the playing field. You're understanding that there's another student who has an advantage and you're giving them a boost, you're aiding them, you're helping them so that they can be in an environment where they can be on the same level with that student who has an advantage already for learning, who has already the courage and the confidence, understanding that they have the ability to do this because they're not necessarily in a society, in a world that says that because of the color of your skin, because of your race, or because of your gender, you can't do this. You can't ignore it.
No, I don't think you ever solve a problem without identifying it. And the elements that you were talking about, I think, are ways to identify it.
Yeah.
But just, a question. Do you think that racism is become too much of an excuse, or do you think it actually exists? I mean, I know it exists. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't mean it that way. But is it sort of a fallback problem? You can fall back on it so you can avoid what you really need to address to solve these issues.
I think when you quote unquote fall back on it, or rather when you choose to look at it as a problem, then you are getting to the root of it. When you understand that as a black female, I already have the privilege of being lighter, but I am black. And when you get down to the point, when you understand that I am a black female in a class where I am the only black female, and there are no black males, and my class of 15 to 20 students are all white, and I'm in an environment where I don't feel like I can connect with any of my classmates. I'm in an environment where I feel like I cannot connect with my teacher, and my teacher is teaching a history, American history. We're all Americans. This is a culture that we should all feel like we can connect on. When I am explicitly being misrepresented or not represented at all, where I feel where it's daunting for me to raise my hand and to ask a question, even if the question isn't necessarily to challenge, but just out of curiosity. When my history isn't being taught, there's kind of like confidence that's leaching out of me. And when you acknowledge that that's a problem, then you start solving the problem.
We're going to have to take a break, but I'd like to follow up on that a little bit because that's sort of interesting. So if you'll stay with us, we'll be back in a minute.
Television is a powerful and influential medium that allows different groups the opportunity to produce programming that directly affects their own communities. Public, educational, and government access channels ensure that all people, regardless of race, age, gender, disability, religion, or economic status, have access to local government information and the use of a public communication forum. Make sure everyone has a voice. Support your local PEG channels.
Hi, welcome back. This is Larry Petraccaro with Education Roundtable, and with me, Mia Goldstein, Justice Williams, and Nina Kambili. Just before the break, we were talking a little bit, actually Justice was telling us about the way that you can be in a class and yet still feel not a part of it. I guess is that basically what you were saying?
Right.
And Nina, you had something, so let me jump to you for a minute. You had something that you wanted to say, and then I'd like to get back to you if I may, Justice.
It was just relating to the question about maybe race being a fallback excuse or something like that. But I think as
Not race, but racism.
Yeah, racism.
Okay.
But I think that as a nation, even a community, obviously, we're kind of coming to realize that and racism are much stronger constructs than we might have previously thought. I mean, if we're looking at recent events and then we're thinking about how they relate back to our experiences in our community. So the alienation that, people in Ferguson and Baltimore feel, or like fear of authority or lack of opportunity, and how does that relate back to our community? And these feelings of isolation, whether it's just feeling that your history is untaught or feeling that people can't relate to your experiences and that you have no one to talk about it with. So I think it's become like a very sensitive topic for a lot of people. So even if it isn't warranted in a situation, which I personally think it is, but it's obviously open for debate, but I think that in those situations, then someone is going to be quick to fall back on that because that's an experience that they feel isn't addressed or recognized as often as it should be.
So you're saying that the fallback to racism is because, in fact, it's a more prevalent attitude or a stronger structural element of our society than white people like me might want to give it credit for. Is that what you're saying?
I think racism is the root of every problem the school faces,
Oh, yeah.
essentially. Like, the school, Maplewood and South Orange are not unlike Baltimore. They're not unlike Ferguson. Like, these problems exist everywhere. Columbia High School is, in fact, a microcosm of America's greater institutional racism. So to say that racism is the fallback, no, it's really the root. The fallback is making excuses for the racism.
Right. Because your race is everything that you are. And I think it's hard. I think the reason why it's seen almost kind of as something foreign to someone who's white is because I don't think until you understand your privilege and the ways that being white has completely shaped your reality, then you don't understand how being black has completely shaped your reality. It shapes who I see myself in terms of whether or not I am attractive, the beauty standard in America, whether or not I am intelligent, whether or not I can actually succeed. And it isn't until recently that a 5-year-old, 6-year-old black boy can look to the president of the United States and say, I could do that. And again, when you have black men in this community watching that they could easily be killed, and they've done nothing wrong, they have nothing on them, and then to go and sit now in a class with faces that look exactly like what potentially your killer could look like, faces that say things like, well, what about his history? What about the fact that he shouldn't have been wearing that? What if he could have done this? What if he could have done that? He was a thug. Those things all shape who you are. To a young black male, while young white males are being told things like, when you go to school, be good to your teacher, be respectful to your teacher. They're told very, very innocent things. A young black male, specifically my brother, if I'm going to reach back to my brother's being told how not to dress, how not to walk, how not to speak, what not to wear on his head even if it's raining, how to drive, how to speak to a police officer, what friends to be friends with. This idea of staying away from the black kids, stay away from the kids who are like you, stay away from the kids who look like you, who share your culture, and reach out to the white kids because in some way that's better. It guarantees your success. The fact that you have to validate who you are, your intelligence, your beauty, through something that is completely not you, through another person, that you get your acceptance through someone white, it's horrible. Your confidence level and
Invalidating.
Yeah, it completely invalidates who you are and you lose yourself. And it's better to find comfort in people who look like you and who talk like you and act like you than having to deal with it.
Well, no, hadn't thought about it in those terms, so it's interesting to get that perspective, and that's part of the whole reason to try to have a conversation to
Right.
get past this. Because, quite honestly, my initial reaction is, I won't say negative, but it's almost more one of, not exactly disbelief, but I think to myself, we've taken we've taken black as a general term for everybody, and we've, as a society, we seem to think all black people should think alike, right? At least that's how I see it. But we don't expect all white people to think alike. And, all white people aren't the same. But, so maybe that's part of a conversation we have to have, that we're, you guys aren't all the same, we're not all the same. And I don't know how you get to that, but I know you're absolutely right that you won't get to it without addressing it, without identifying it, without trying to make some progress. And it sounds like, you guys have, I admire you for what you're doing. It's because it's not an easy subject to talk about. It just isn't.
I think in a way we kind of are. When you were saying about we generalize black and that we aren't all the same, and we speak about this even when we're speaking about gender, when we're speaking about sex. I think there's one thing I can say with complete confidence, is that no matter how different Nina and I are, one thing that she and I will share, that another random black student walking in the hall will always share, and one thing that will always unite us is being treated as a black person. That's one thing that we can always and will always bond over. That even though we may be completely different, our parents may come from different parts of the country, we will always share and understand the experience of what it means to be black, because we understand what it's like to be treated as a black person, all the things and all the consequences and all the responsibility that comes along with just the word, the color, black.
And this might be shifting gears a little bit, but going off of what Justice said, I was thinking, I think I read it in like a 7 Habits book, and it was talking about going from, we talk a lot about tolerance, tolerance as being a really great thing, but like moving on from tolerance to celebration of diversity, and then, Justice is the president of Diversity Rocks, and now that, like, I'm thinking about it, I think that might be where Columbia's problem is.
Right.
We tolerate diversity. We acknowledge that we are divided, but we're not celebrating diversity. We're not coming together and saying we all have different experiences, and as a community that will make us richer. And I think I've even, observed that in Maplewood South Orange, that we're not saying we all have different experiences. We are from like different backgrounds, different races, different socioeconomic statuses. Now how can we come together and make that work and like build something amazing? So I think that one of the central questions, at least for our generation and over the next couple of years, is going to be, how do we move on from tolerance to celebration?
Do you have any thoughts about how we might do that? Because
I mean, I agree about the idea of leveling the playing field. So, at these forums that they're talking about reforming the leveling system in our district, they're talking about how can we put in place structures to help kids who might not be getting the help they need at home, the help that they need from teachers, or how can we educate parents on how to navigate the system? And because these are all disadvantages that we don't even think of, because they're honestly at this point cultural. So how can we help these kids like reach success when we haven't even thought of these things as holding them back?
Right.
And I think we're finally acknowledging our differences, and we're accepting them, and then we're trying to like help people within the context of that rather than deny it.
Right.
So I think that approach could really be helpful.
to try to level the playing field.
Mhm.
Right.
And any thoughts from the two of you? I mean, you agree with Nina?
Right,
Yeah.
you definitely have to acknowledge that there's a problem and then be able to sympathize with the same way that, in a very simple way, we can sympathize with and not feel guilty about, sympathize with people who are just in another country who we think they're poor or they are poor, and we understand that we have an advantage because of the country that we live in and the rights that we have and everything that comes with being an American, and that therefore we shouldn't feel guilty for all these things that we have. It's just the way that history has worked together to put us where we are, but that we give back, we give to charity. With race, there is an obvious advantage that white Americans have, that white people have. And I think in the same way, there should be a sympathy where we understand that there is a history that's happened here. There's a system that's happened here that has kept these people disadvantaged. And I have the power now, I have the authority, I have the advantage, I have the privilege to now give back and understand and sympathize and help them. And the only way to do that is to first understand that they are disadvantaged, the same way we understand that the running water that we have and the heat that we have and all the small things that we don't necessarily, everything that we think is normal in our lives, that we indulge in and that we cuddle around, are things that are not necessarily things that everyone else has. And that's something that happens in America just with race. The things that a white person has that they just think is normal are things that black people are like, I didn't know that existed.
But you're talking about not just physical, material things. I think
No.
you're talking more about. It sounds to me like from the kind of the course of this conversation that the things you're talking about are the perception of their role in society as
Right.
much as anything else.
Yeah, definitely.
So a key element in that change is to get those students to or people really to feel a part of this larger society. So it's more like trying to get everyone to agree they have something in common, or self-confidence, whatever you were talking about. But it was interesting to listen to the way you guys described the disadvantages, because they fall out of a social structure necessarily, not necessarily material structure. Is that what you're? And it has to start early, you're saying. It has to. Well, any problem is more easily solved the sooner you get to it. It just without question. I learned that with mechanical things, but it's a lot easier. So is it in your opinion that we need to start at the the elementary level?
Oh yeah. When we had the race forum, I think race. There's some kids in Columbia High School who don't think that race is an appropriate topic for high schoolers. And these are, of course, usually students who are white, who don't really experience race every day and don't see race and how it is very much appropriate and very much a part of their lives every day. And when we did the forum on race back at the middle school, and we had a panel discussion, it was all students of color. And I looked at the audience, and some students of color came up and shared their experience of being mixed and being called an Oreo because they spoke differently than they were expected to speak. I thought, if I were sitting in the 8th grade, sitting in this auditorium, and I were able to look up to 3 students of color telling me, I felt this way too, I was frustrated too, I understand where you're coming from, and the way you feel is not wrong, and you should be frustrated, and that you speaking properly and you acting differently than the way people expect you to act is not a bad thing, it's a great thing. You're defying a stereotype and you're helping. These are things that middle schoolers are going through. These are things that I was going through in elementary school, and I wasn't equipped with the vocabulary and the knowledge and the understanding that what I was going through was a part of a larger system of my oppression that I would later face in high school, that I would later face in college, that I would later face in adulthood. If I had someone like me to look up to then, I think it would have helped immensely. And I think I would have had the confidence that I do now to be like, I'm not an Oreo just because I can speak properly. I'm not white because I can speak properly. Intelligence shouldn't be whitened. It shouldn't be whitewashed. I am who I am.
Well, let me say this, not only you and you and you, but you are very articulate, all 3 of you, and obviously you've thought about this thing, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to bring it to the floor to let people be aware of it. And I also have to appreciate the fact that we're out of time, so I want to thank the 3 of you very much. This might be a discussion we're going to have to continue, I don't know, but it was kind of eye-opening, so thank you very much, I appreciate it.
We'd love to come back.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Believe me,
Thank you for joining us.